everyone. We will begin the webinar on 10:15, 10 points of quality, 15 things you're doing incorrectly in your shop. I'm Melissa Joles with RDA Impact. Mark Olson, CEO of VECO Experts, is your presenter today. The presentation will take approximately 50 minutes. We are recording it and we'll post it on our YouTube channel. If you have questions during the webinar, you can type them in the chat box at the bottom right of your screen, and Mark will answer them during the presentation. Now, I'll turn it over to Mark.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Welcome. For those of you on the West Coast, it's 11 o'clock. For those of you on the East Coast, well, it doesn't matter what time it is. You're shoveling snow anyways. So, anyways, thank you for being here. Today is kind of a culmination of the other presentations I've done for RDA Impact. Some of you see me live, some of you haven't. But one of the other ones we did was called Post-Repair Inspection. The other one was called the Bulletproof File. And now this is the 10 points of quality. And I promise you, if you follow what I'm saying today, that it will have an impact on the quality in your shop and therefore your business as a whole. And then I'm going to go through 15 things that you're doing likely incorrectly. Every shop we walk into in the United States, Canada, around the world, they actually are doing the same pattern of repairs, and I'm going to walk through what those are, how to stop them, and those kinds of things so that you actually stay in business. So first thing I'm going to go into is the 10 steps for quality in collision repair. And it's actually pretty simple. But before we get going, for those of you that have been in my presentations before, I don't want you to cheat because you probably already know the answer. But I try and show this one to really emphasize a point, and I've showed it in all three, I show them in every presentation I do. And so there's a whole bunch of different things I'm doing with this. So I want you to just follow along. So this is a 2017 Nissan Sentra, and it comes into your shop. And I don't care if you're a shop or you're a supplier, you're a trainer. I don't care who you are in the industry. I want you to follow along. It's very important. So this thing comes to your shop with or without an insurance estimate. So it's a photo estimate. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter. But what it has a scratch on the side of the bumper cover. And a scratch in the bumper cover only in the paint. It's a 2017 Nissan Sentra. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to, first of all, look at the scratch. And you can see that it's a scratch on the bumper. And what I want you to do is write down two things. First of all, what you believe you would do in the repair process in your shop on a normal basis. And then the second thing I want you to do is right below that, put down about how much you think that would cost to repair in your shop. And then after that, I want you to put your initials, kind of like you're renting a car. So what you should have on a piece of paper, and if you don't do this right now, I know you later on, you're gonna say, man, I wish I would have done that, because I'm gonna show you something really, really, really cool. This is not a test. You don't have to turn it in. This is just for you. So on a piece of paper, write down, and you can't do this on your computer, you got to do it on paper. So how much, what you would do, repair it, replace it, total the car, touch it up, whatever. And then how much you think it would cost to repair a scratch on the bumper cover of a 2019 Nissan Sentra. And then on top of that, right below that, put your initials like you're renting a car. Okay, and we'll come back to that. So questions. And I want you to ask these questions for yourself. How many of you think that collision repair is getting harder than it was 10 years ago? So just kind of answer that for yourself. And then how many of you support legislation for having OEM procedures be a law? Just kind of answer that for yourself. Now, collision repair has never been easier. I'm going to say that again. So if you said, man, it's getting harder, no, it's getting easier. Now, it's different. It's changed, but it's gotten easier. So I'll just use a little example. You go to IKEA, you buy a dresser. Comes in a box that's flat, it's not a dresser yet. You got to bring it home and put it together. So if you, and maybe you even have another one that's sitting there and you have to look at the other one to determine how to put this one together. That's not very easy to do. However, if you just pull the instructions and look, it's pretty easy to do. And then, an hour or two later, you think you're a furniture god or goddess because you put together a dresser. Pretty simple. Collision repair is no different. It takes some skills. It takes reading the instructions. So that's the first one. It's changed. It's easier now than it was 25 years ago, because 25 years ago, we didn't have any rules. We didn't really have any very good instructions. And number two, careful what you wish for in legislation. And I'm going to prove this to you as we go through this presentation. So if you want it to be a law that the shops and everybody has to follow the OEM, careful what you wish for. Because think about it. If you're going to aim headlights, CCC, ADP, and Mitchell, Autotex and Mitchell, what they do is they say it's 0.4 of an hour. What does that include? Well, there's no P pages to tell you what it includes. I've called all three. They don't have it in the P pages, and they have no idea to put it in there. In fact, they might even just take it out completely. Here's why. If you think about it, you align the headlights, and then you also have somebody sitting in the seat because it has to have the proper loading. You have to check the trunk to make sure it's empty, adjust the air pressure on all 4 tires to the placard in the door jamb. On top of that, you have to measure distance off the door. You have to put in a level floor, which most floors aren't level, so you have to level the car to the door, the proper distance, and align the right front headlight and left front headlight. Oh, by the way, you also got to check the oil and top it off, windshield washer fluid and top it off. Are you really doing that for 0.4? Now, the question is, you're either doing a lot of stuff for free or you're just not doing it. What we find around the country is people just aren't doing it. Back to careful what you wish for. If, in fact, they made a law that said you have to follow the OEM and you don't, it's not like a minor infraction. You actually broke the law. So if somebody got mad at you, they just call the police, they come and arrest you for not doing it. Okay, careful what you wish for. Watch out for the legislation that a lot of companies are actually doing. Many of them are worded correctly, but there's a few words different, which make it good, and some that make it really bad. So watch that. Okay, so we have proper OEM required repairs, like safety items. Like a Subaru comes in, it's about 17 hours to do a Subaru. One of my company, VECO Experts, we work with a company called Wadsworth International, and we do the audits for Subaru. And there's safety items. It's about 17 hours on the average car to actually test, pull the steering column out and measure all that. It's required. And if you don't do it, again, you have to follow the OEM. And if you don't do it, you haven't followed the OEM. Weld tests, we're going to talk about that in a little bit too. Corrosion protection, ADAS resets, electronic resets, battery disconnects, bolt torque scanning, OEM information and research, pre-measuring the vehicle. There's a lot of stuff that goes in today that didn't go in before. And I've said this before many times. If your average severity, just do a checkup from the neck up. If your average severity is not about 6 to 7 grand, just average across the board, you're doing one of two things. You're either doing a whole bunch of stuff for free, or you're not fixing cars correctly. Either way, one's going to put you out of business, one can put you in jail. Either way, it doesn't matter on that. Now, I'm open. At the end of this, I'll give you my cell phone number. I'll give you my email. If you have questions about that, that is the way it is, and I'm happy to explain that. That's not this presentation, though. This is this presentation. So at VECO Experts, we just have a 10-step repair process. It's actually very, very simple. If you bring the vehicle in and you do proper scanning and diagnostics, and then you pull the procedures at the time of the estimate. So back to my example of the aiming headlights. So if you put down aim headlights, at the time you write the estimate, you would pull aim the headlight information, and you'd find that it has a whole bunch of other things that you have to do, which then you would put on your estimate, which we would then give that to the technician. The technician would then do that. Now, you don't have to charge for it. That's up to you. That's a business decision. And if you want to do stuff for free, okay, but you can't not do it. I know it's a double negative. Sorry about that. Okay, number 3, we give the procedures to the technician. You'd be amazed how many times we go into shops and we find that technicians don't actually have the actual information that was pulled in the front office. And then more importantly, the technician's got to follow them. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Proper welds and attachment, whether it's rivet bonding. If you actually put the car back together the way it was built, give an example, a Honda Civic, if you put a rear floor panel in the way it was built, you have not repaired the car correctly. It's different to repair than it was to actually put on. Proper corrosion protection, proper use of the quality control sheet, proper refinish, proper use of the intake SOP, and proper vehicle protection. Now, if you did all 10 of those things, scan it, pull procedures when you write the estimate, give them to the technician follows it, do proper welds and attachment, proper corrosion protection, proper QC, proper refinish, proper intake, and vehicle protection. The point is, would you agree that if you did all 10 of those things on every vehicle, every time, that the repair outcome would be highly predictable and very high quality? Now, here's the sad part. When we go into shops the first time, so VECO, we work with shops around the country, not just for the OEM audit stuff, but we actually have shops that sign up to have us come into their shop every single month. That's one of the flagship services we do. And the first time we walk into a shop, shops are doing about 40% of this correctly, which is kind of scary, because if you think about it, you might have thought you were doing those correctly. So it's actually that simple. So why does it be so hard to be predictable? I'm going to tell you why. So I used to say quality is a process, not a final destination. Quality is just a process, not a final destination. I actually changed that, though, in the last couple of years. Now, I don't disagree with my first statement that I used to say, but actually culture and process is quality, because it takes a quality culture and a quality process to produce quality repairs. And I don't care if you're fixing cars, you're building airplanes, or you're doing paperwork. If you have a great process and your culture doesn't buy into it, good luck. If you have a great culture, everybody's got a good attitude and they want to work right, but you don't have a real process for people to follow, good luck. If you have a great culture that embraces quality and process, and everybody knows what it is, you're going to get quality. If you don't have those two things, you're not. And that's what we work on at VECO. So let's just look at just some of the highlights of the 10-point that I just went through. And by the way, Melissa is going to send out that form to everybody, so you have it, all 10 of them, just on a piece of paper. And she's also going to send out to you this presentation. So with this presentation, you'll wind up actually getting all the things that you actually need to be able to recreate this, show it to your technicians, etc. And if you follow this presentation to a T, you will see a market increase in your company. Okay, so number one, we said scanning. Number two was OEM information at the time of the estimate. So you got to pull it on every job, every time when you write the estimate. Not pull the information up that you used last week on a Nissan Sentra, but you got to pull it out for what's today. Things change. I'll give you an example. The Ford F-150 bedside. They just changed it again about 2 weeks ago. Since their inception of building the vehicle, they've changed the bedside replacement procedure probably, I don't know exactly, 7, 8, 9 times maybe. So it must be written with OEM data. Don't use aftermarket sources. And when I mean aftermarket, I don't mean like, glue suppliers, those kinds of companies. It's got to be OEM data. So even bumper scratches are going to require OEM data. So OEMs have limitations on bumpers like Nissan, General Motors, BMW, and a whole bunch of other ones, okay? You got to pull the information, not just the cut locations. So if you're going to put a quarter panel on a car, what else are you going to do? You're going to disconnect the battery. Okay, fine. What electronic resets are we going to do? How about glass replacement? How about sublet specs, issues, steel content, all that stuff? You got to pull everything. I heard recently there's a company that is going to take your repair order and they will pull everything you need to fix that car for a fee. That's all I've heard. We'll see if that happens. And I believe that at a certain point, the estimating systems will do that as well. Now, here's the problem. Many of you say, well, our estimating system already does that. It does not do that. Think about it. When you're putting a quarter panel on, it's true, they'll serve up a quarter panel. It's not a problem. But when you put a quarter panel on, you got to disconnect the battery, you got to retorque the wheels, all that stuff's not going to be there. So just to say you pulled the cut location is not enough. Okay, getting information. So we say always start at the ICAR RTS. I'll talk about that in a minute. All data in Mitchell and FreeStarts are good for estimates, but not for repairs. Because the repair, when you're actually fixing the car, you need today's data. When you're writing the estimate, it's not absolutely as critical. It's helpful, but it's not as critical. So Mitchell's really good for GM because they have a partnership where all the information is automatically updated with the system, and hopefully other OEMs will follow. OEM One Stop will give you some information, but the OEM is actually the easiest to do because it'll say, like on the quarter panel, it'll come down and say, and do proper welding with a hyperlink. So if you want to know, and you're going to pull up for what they say proper welding is, you click that, and then it pulls that up and serves it up to you. In ALLDATA and some of the other ones, you have to look for it in a lot of cases. And here's the thing, information costs money, and it is money well spent to deliver the vehicle on time and create expectations with the customer. And our tagline at VECO Experts is so you can get it right the first time. The reason why I say get it right the first time is you might have a second time if nobody dies, and or they're not going to pay you to do it again the second time. So you might as well do it right the first time. What does that take? You got to follow all 10. So this is a example. So let's go back to that Nissan Sentra that I had you write down your information on. So one thing you can do, this is the iCar RTS. If you've taken iCar classes, and recently this is free. If you haven't taken iCar classes, not a problem. It's $200 a year. $200 a year is not very much money. So one of the things we can do is we can go to the Nissan statements that's in here. And what do we? And another place we can also go to is OEM One Stop. And in OEM One Stop, you'll see that there's actually two things right there. So one of them is the blind spot warnings and the bumper. I can't read my own screen. Hey, bumper fascia replacement. So if we look at those are two that you kind of relate to: blind spots under the bumper, bumper fascia replacement. You might want to look at those two. Now you can find them through the iCar RTS, or you can find them through OEM One Stop. These are easy, simple, quick resources. So Nissan says, and I'm going to just put my glasses on so I can see it real quick. So June 20th, 2016. So that's what 5 years ago? Not quite 5 years ago. Nissan came out and said in the bottom, reconditioned fascia with one damage may be out of specification to the original undamaged Nissan bumper. Therefore, it do not use reconditioned bumpers. And if you think about it, if a bumper's been damaged in a collision and you repair it, isn't that reconditioned? Well, a lot of shops saw that and went, oh, geez, we can't fix bumpers. Insurance company said, it doesn't say that. It's reconditioned. We're going to fix this bumper. We're not going to buy a reconditioned fascia. So in February 2017, about, 8, 9 months, 10 months later, maybe off of my months there a little bit, they actually came out and said, do not repair the bumper covers. So now, if that's the case, what was your response on that original one that we talked about in the beginning when I said, what would you do with this bumper cover? So if you put down repair the bumper cover or do anything other than replace it OEM, it actually now is replace OEM is the only option on this per the manufacturer, and we got to follow the OEM. So if we're following the OEM, we've replaced the bumper cover for a scratch. And then there's no painting, no repair, that's it, okay? So now, if that's the case, I'd like you now to go back to where you wrote it down last time. And if you want to change your answer, just write it down again, saying, oh, well, now we're going to replace it. That's the right answer, OEM. And now put down about how much money. And if you put that down in the beginning, good for you. And then also then just right next to it, same. And then put your initials under that. Okay, and again, this is for you. It's going to show you something pretty cool a little bit later. Okay, so now we want to give the information to the technician. All information given to them. And also, how about your sublet vendors? Subaru, if you're going to put a windshield in a Subaru has eyesight, special ways to put the windshield in. It's not just a normal windshield, pop out, pop in kind of scenario. So we want to make sure we give the instructions to the sublet vendor, to the sublet people. Now, I know a lot of you over the years where the guy comes in or the gal comes in saying, hey, here's how I want you to fix my car, and they give you the documents. That's exactly what I'm asking you to do with your sublet people. Why? Because number one, they want to know, they probably don't know. And number two, you're liable for their repairs. So you want it done the way that you want it done, not the way that they think it should be done. Okay. And it's really hard to believe. that even if you give the stuff to your technicians, they still have to follow it. Now, we all have that technician, the one that's been doing this for 30 years, doesn't need instructions, blah, 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 blah. Well, I'm okay with that, not a problem. But don't give them cars that are new, give them cars that are 30 years old. But if they want to work on new cars, they have to follow the instructions for the new cars, not the technology they were doing, 30 years ago. Think about it. That's the late 80s, early 90s. Okay. Now, you can go out to your cars in your shop. Here's your homework. Go out to your cars in your shop that you see right now, and you might have information on how to repair the car, the quarter panel, etc. Look at the paperwork. If that paperwork isn't dirty, meaning that there's fingerprints on it or that kind of thing, or the papers are a little bit ruffled, your technician probably hasn't even looked at them. Now, if they are, that's great. I mean, I actually walked into a shop, it was in Florida, and I was in one of our monthly shops a couple of years ago, and I walked in there, and the guy was putting a quarter panel on a BMW, and I looked at it, and I'm like, hey, nice job welding it. And he goes, yeah, I did it all. I said, where's your instructions? And he showed me the instructions, and I knew this going into it, but BMW said to rivet the entire car, no welds, and except in certain spots. So I said, well, wait a minute. It says right here you're supposed to weld, and here's the bad part. He had all the rivets sitting on his toolbox, didn't know what they went to. Well, maybe we would want to read the instructions in the beginning. And so we're talking about not just where to section it, but weld counts, product usage, and then we got to verify all this. Okay, proper corrosion protection. First of all, weld through primer, or not, depending on the OEM. If you got a Chrysler that comes in, no weld through primer. If you got a General Motors, you're going to need weld through primer. Honda, no weld through primer if you're going to mag weld, but if you're going to squeeze type, you would. So it depends, and every car's a little bit different. Back to following the OEM. If you got copper weld through primer, we call it contraband. Get it out of your shop. Get zinc weld through primer. You got it. There's no way. There's no OEM that says copper weld through primer is okay to use. Again, send me the hate mail. I'm totally happy to completely support this. I'm also one of the hosts of Collision Hub Repair University Live. We did a whole show on this, an hour and a half on copper weld through primer versus zinc primer. So I can send that to you. No self-etching primer. If you got self-etching primer in the body department, you're fixing cars wrong. And when I say that, a lot of times people will shoot on some self-etching primer and then they'll put seam seal over the top of it. Again, we did an hour and a half show on exactly that. Many shops are doing that. Got to put a two-part 2K product under there that's direct to metal under the seam sealer. Now you might say, wait a minute, we do direct to metal seam sealer. I'll show you some pictures here in a minute on why you would never want to do that. So use epoxy where appropriate. If you aren't using epoxy under urethane glass, under body filler for some of the OEMs like Toyota, or under seam sealer, you're fixing cars wrong. Seam sealer on parts. So, the new hood didn't come with seam sealer. Got to put it on before you paint it. And it's not included. That's why you want to get the instructions up front. Seam seal all welded seams, even if they weren't seam sealed from the factory. Again, we did a show on that. Cavity wax. Here's your checkup from the neck up. If you're not buying 2 cans of cavity wax per technician per week, let me rephrase it. You're not buying 1 can of cavity wax per technician per week. So in other words, 4 cans of cavity wax per body technician per week. You are not fixing cars right. So just go back to your things. It's kind of funny. I could actually call your supplier and go, hey, how much cavity wax are they buying? Yeah, they buy about a can a month. How many body techs they got? They got 4. Guess what? Shop's in trouble. So the OEM actually does give you information on where to put cavity wax and all the different things, where to seam seal, how to do it, etc. Where to put it inside doors and all that. So on brand new parts. Now, how about the copper weld through primer conversation? So a lot of manufacturers are going to give you how to actually do things. And this is Toyota. It's a CRIB, a Collision Repair Information Bulletin. And basically they're saying, you have to use weld through primer, and they're saying, do not use copper weld through primer. Well, people didn't like to hear that. So they actually did an article on it in their Collision Pro saying, don't do this. again, at Collision Hub, we did a hour show on this. We showed you why. So now, in my post-repair inspection class that I did, I don't know, Melissa, it was probably what, last September? It's February now, so 4 or 5 months ago. I talked about this. So if and this picture right here cost the shop about $14,000. I'll tell you why. So I looked at this picture, and it looks like it's either rust, maybe somebody replaced the core support. Either it's rust or it's copper weld through primer, and there's no cavity wax. So what do I know? Number one, if it's rust, you can't stop the rust. Number two, if it's copper weld through primer, it's a Toyota Tacoma, and Toyota says don't use copper weld through primer. And then on top of that, they didn't use cavity wax, so it's rusting in between the seams. Regardless of that, this became a complete re-repair, cost about $14,000, because after it was taken apart, that's what the car looks like. And this one started with a customer who basically didn't like the tape lines in their jam, and the shop told them that's all the better it gets. And notice the overspray on top of the, on top of the different, the body mount, etc. Okay, so this one is one where they put it's a rear body panel. It's a rear body panel on an Audi. They put the rear body panel on, and Audi, they got the whole kind of glopping seam sealer that goes on there, and trying to make it look like it's stacking dimes and that kind of stuff. And what they did is they used direct to metal seam sealer, which most people put, as it says in the product, direct to metal. So they just put it over direct to metal. But if you notice by looking at the arrows right here in the middle, the seam sealer here and here didn't touch. And if you look right in the middle, there's a little spot of rust. Also, up along the edge, it looks pretty good, except when you start to really look at it and you pull it down, it's actually rusting underneath. Now you notice it's not rusting bad under the seam sealer, but just on the edge, and then eventually it will rust. This became a complete re-repair. Now remember I said a minute ago you have to seam seal all welded seams, whether it was seam sealed or not, which was in this slide, right? Seam seal all welded seams, whether it's seam sealed from the factory or not. Well, this shop said, right here, they said, well, the factory didn't seam seal, so we didn't think we had to. That's what it looks like. Here's the deal. If you repair a vehicle and you don't submerge it in a pool of E-coat, just like the manufacturer did at the factory, then you have to seam seal it so water doesn't get to the welds. I don't care if you use weld through primer or not. Again, we did another show on that, and iCars had that out for years. Now, on this one here, no seam sealer. If water gets in between there, it's going to rust. It's a complete re-repair. Now, this one's kind of crazy where they actually seam sealed it almost, but then the flange wasn't completely straight, so they just didn't seam seal it. And then this is kind of interesting. So Kia, a lot of people say Hyundai and Kia don't have repair information. They actually do. Kia is actually much better than Hyundai, even though they're the same company. It's kind of weird. But this is from Kia. It's a Kia Forte. And what they're saying is that they have wax injection holes in their hood. And I believe there's 9 of them. And so you have to put the wax in there, put 2 coats through 9 different holes in under the hood, and also in the bottom of like a door panel. So when you replace the hood, what do? You got to seam seal it. That's not this slide. You got to seam seal the hood because it wasn't seam sealed from the factory. Then you got to paint the underside, paint the entire car. Then you got to inject wax on the back side of the hood to do it. Remember back to can a week protect of cavity wax? The reason why you're probably not using as much cavity wax as what I said is because you're probably not doing this stuff. Let's take it all the way back to the beginning. Had you gotten this information when you wrote the estimate, you would have put this on the estimate, charged for it. And if you don't charge for it, at least the technician would have a line on it that says, cavity wax, 9 holes underside of new hood, or whatever you want to put. Now, you might say to me, hey, Mark, you know what? You're not living in the real world. The real world is body shops, the insurance companies and blah, 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 blah. It doesn't matter. And the bottom line is it doesn't matter what you get paid. All that matters is you follow the OEM and you fix the car the way the OEM said to fix the car. That's what the customer says. And if you're not going to do that, not a problem. Tell the customer that you're not going to fix the car the way that the manufacturer says to fix it. So the customer says, hey, don't worry about putting wax in the inside of my hood like Kia says. Then then at that point you can't warranty it at all from the rust standpoint. But my guess is you're not having that conversation. You're just not doing it. Okay. Again, throw the spears at me. I'm actually here to help you, and that's why I'm doing this presentation. Okay. Quality control forms. First of all, don't make them too complicated. Keep it simple. Now, if you have one of those quality control forms where you have, 100 different things you're going to check, what's going to happen is it's going to get pencil whipped. I'm going to say it again. If you have way too many things on the form, it's going to get pencil whipped. Now, one of the things we recommend is to do a stage check. So like when the body man's done with it, it actually gets checked by somebody other than the body man. Think about it. You type a really nice letter to the insurance company or to your congressperson, and basically when you type your letter, do you spell check it? Sure. Do you grammar check it? Sure. If it's a really important one, what else? Well, you take it and you have somebody else read it and they find some things, or even worse, or even not even worse, how about better? Go out, go to lunch and come back and reread it. You'll find things you did wrong. You can't quality control. As soon as you finish it, you can't say it's done. Have somebody else look. It can be a peer review. We recommend doing it by stages. There's lots of variations to the process. We talk about this in the bulletproof file a lot deeper than this, but the biggest issue is not using it the way it's designed, and the form is pencil whipped. Now, I want you to go underneath. Remember back to the interactive piece. So remember that Nissan Sentra that we looked at a while ago? So you wrote down originally what you thought, then you wrote down after we learned that you had to replace the OEM. And I want you to put an initial next to the last initial you did there, just like you're renting a car. And I'm telling you, if you did this, you'll see something really cool. Put your initials there. What you're going to find is all three initials that you did are not identical. They're similar, but they're not identical. So if you look at a quality control form and it does the old, it's got an initial and then they draw a line through all the stuff and they initial the bottom, that's a pencil whip. Pretty obvious. On top of that, if you take, on top of that, if you see the same initials all the way down and it's kind of the same pen, the same pencil, somebody writes something today and they write something tomorrow, chances are really good they're not going to use exactly the same pen or the same pencil. It doesn't, normally it won't unless somebody has their favorite special pen. So you'll see slight differences, and without the slight differences, it's normally been pencil whipped. So here's the thing. If you have a paper quality control form and you put it in the car, go to your paint department today and just do this. Go to your paint department and make sure that that form's been filled out for everything that needed to happen before that. So all the body, all the body things, all the parts things, and all that. Because here's ironically what happens: that the quality control forms are filled out completely at the end, but they're not in process. So remember I said quality is a process, not a final destination, and it takes a quality culture with quality process to create quality. Well, if you want to say that your process and your culture is, we'll slam it at the end just to be compliant with a file, a bulletproof file, it could come back to bite you. A whole nother conversation. We talked about that quite a bit in the bulletproof file that we talked about, and also the post-repair inspection. So you probably noticed that you have three different ones. Now, you can look this up online. So there's a case that is a whole bunch of people versus Ride the Ducks Seattle and also Ride the Ducks International. Long story short, one of those little duck boats where they drive on land and then they go into the water. They're in Seattle, they're in Pittsburgh, St. Louis, all that kind of stuff. Anyhow, the axle broke on the left front of one of these, went across the center line and killed 7 people in an oncoming bus. And I was involved in that case. And one of the things I did, because it all becomes about quality control, because you got to have the checks coming in and the checks going out, because not only is it a commercial vehicle, it's a commercial marine vessel. So there's 2 different levels of checking you have to do on these before it goes out and when it comes back in by qualified people. So I said, give me 100 of these. Now they got 47 of these things. So Giving me 100 of those is no big deal. And I said, I want 100 of them from different time periods within 30 days of each other, done by different people. Just give them to me. What I was able to demonstrate is they were all, not all of them that I could tell, but most of them were pencil whipped. So unfortunately, when the trial came up, the attorney never even called me to testify, because in the depositions with the people, they turned around and they were able to prove that they pencil whipped them, because in the deposition they said, yeah, we don't have time, we pencil whipped those. So basically, cost them millions and millions and millions of dollars. Unfortunately, people died and put people out of business. Okay, proper refinish, as appropriate for the repair. Color match, texture, chip coatings, underhood color, interior colors, use of substrates, the epoxy, and no acid or base coat, clear coat under urethane set glass. We did a show on that as well. So this is one here where the OEM says that what you have to do is you have to, on this on a Toyota, I believe it's, I don't know, it's Corolla or whatever it is, the front edge of it, they want chipping primer. What does that mean? That means that you put chipping primer underneath the base coat clear coat. How many shops are actually doing this? And Bulletproof File would say you'd have to have this on as a line item saying that you did this. And why would you do anything for free? Because it's another operation. So what you'd want to do is talk to your technicians and give them the information so they would actually do this. And you should get paid for it. Back to getting the information when you write the estimate. Oh, wrong way, sorry. Okay, so back to this. Very, very simple. So we start with vehicle scanning. That's not this program, but I mean, bottom line is start there. Get the procedures when you write the estimate so you get it all on the estimate. Even if you don't charge for it, at least you have it on the estimate so it gets done. Give the procedures to the technician. So now the technician will follow those. And then we do proper welds and attachment, rivet bonding, whatever it is. Sorry about that. I'm going to turn my phone off because that's highly rude. So we do proper welds and proper corrosion protection, proper use of the quality control sheet. And here's the thing: if you're going to pencil whip your quality control sheets, don't even have them. It's worse to pencil whip them than it is to get rid of them. From a legal standpoint, okay? Proper refinish, proper use of the intake SOP as the car comes in, and proper vehicle protection. So this is what it looks like. It looks like, and it can become pretty obvious. So when we walk into a shop, and again, Melissa's going to give you this presentation, copy my form. I don't care. So if you took those 10 things and went out to your shop and looked at 4 cars, just pick 4 random cars. Here's the thing. If you look down those 10 things, and then you looked at it and said, okay, vehicle scanning, was it done? It's kind of red, yellow, or green. Red is no. Yellow is it's partially done. I don't know how you partially scan, but give you an idea. And then green is you did it. And the next one is, did you get procedures at the time of the estimate? If you didn't get them at all, it's red. If you got some of them, but not all of them, it's yellow. And if you got all of them that you would need, that's like the headlight aiming, you get those when you said that, it would be green. Then the technicians followed them that's a demonstration. Red, yellow, green. So they followed it partially, but not all the way. And then, of course, and it really is a kind of a triple dinger, because if you don't get it when you write the estimate, you don't give it to the tech, how are they going to follow it? So those are all going to be red. And it gets pretty graphic pretty fast. Proper use of the QC. Now, you notice here, proper use of the QC on this form, they're all yellow. That means they did it kinda, which means they filled out the top of it and had it on the car, but they didn't do it. Proper refinish, proper use of the intake SOP, vehicle protection. Just draw this grid out, grab a red pen, a green pen, and a yellow pen, highlighter, and just go yes, no, and just highlight it down and start to look at your picture. The goal is, I mean, I was working with a major MSO on this, and they go, oh my God, all those have to be green. I'm like, I know. The truth is, though, I walked into your shop and most of them were either red or yellow. So I invite you to consider that your shop probably falls into that category. Many of you think that you're great, and many of you are really, really good, but there's going to be room for improvement. Just do this as a self-check. You don't have to hire me. You could hire us, but the reality is that you can do this yourself. It's actually that simple. It really is that simple. Culture and process is quality. Now, it takes a quality culture and a quality process to produce quality repairs. So if you've got a great process, but nobody follows it, well, that's culture. If you've got a great culture, but no process, that's a management problem. And either way, it's going to be tough to produce quality. Now, we can say that about anything, not just painting a car, not just fixing the car. We can say that with your estimates. We can say that with all of it. And with VECO, we're all about holistic. We're all about the entire shop, the estimates and all that. But as you can see by looking at this, we're actually hitting what we call the canary in the coal mine. So if we look at this and we say, oh, okay, well, Tammy, right here, consistently, Tammy doesn't scan cars, but Joel does. Very, very simple, very graphic, very easy to see. Okay. Also, Joel pulls the information, gives it to the tech follows it, and they do proper welding. When Tammy writes the estimate, that doesn't happen. Kind of scary, isn't it? Okay. Let's go. Okay, so remember that car? So now if you think about this car, this is really, really simple. We got to follow the OEM. We got to replace the bumper cover. If we don't, we could be potentially in a lawsuit or a problem if the blind spot detection doesn't work and somebody gets hurt or killed. Now, there was a lawsuit that got filed, I believe it was in Utah. And the lawsuit was, and you can go back and check this, Repair Driven News had it, and that's not this program, but wanted to just point it out. So a vehicle was repaired, it was a Tesla, and customer was driving home. I don't know if she's reading a book or whatever she was doing on autopilot, but that's what people do that drive Teslas. And she hit a parked car, dumpster, or whatever she hit, okay? And she said, I've always driven down that street and never had a problem. So they went to sue Tesla. Tesla pulled up their information and went, oh, wait a minute. That VIN number, a shop in Utah, it was Service King, not picking on Service King, it just happened to be Service King. What they did was they put a bumper cover on it or whatever they did. And so all of a sudden the lawsuit now turns directly towards Service King and away from Tesla because Tesla didn't do it. And all of a sudden the lawsuit went there and then it disappeared. And what I mean by disappeared is it fell out of the news. I don't know exactly what happened on a legal level. All I know is that was a lawsuit that, in my opinion, strictly my opinion, is probably got settled very, very quickly and hushed. Because if you don't do what the manufacturer says to do, even if you don't charge for it, you become liable very, very quickly. Which brings me to the 15 things that can kill your business. Now, and it's probably things that you're doing right now that could put you out of business. So, I kind of got these cool pictures here. Now, not in a political statement, somebody's going to point out and go, Mark, that's not a collision repair facility. I know. When I went out to look for collision repair facilities that had chains on their doors with notices and stuff taped on their door, it's not a big newsworthy event normally. But that gym in New Jersey for violating the COVID thing actually is. So that's a picture of a gym in New Jersey. But I just want to get that this does happen, but you don't really hear about it because it just disappears very, very quickly. But in lawsuits, if you don't pay your lawsuits or the government comes in or etc., this is what happens. It puts you out of business. And I can give you lots and lots of examples of this because in my other company, Future Forensics, I've testified in these trials trying to help shops. But if you don't fix the car right, I can't help you a lot. Okay, here's what we see. Now, I invite you to take this out. Melissa is going to have a sheet that has exactly the 10-point on one side, and it's got what we call the big rocks on the other. And on page 2, I invite you to walk through your shop today or whenever you get it and do a checkup on your shop. And if you actually do this honestly, you're going to find that you've got some holes that could look like this. Okay. So number 1, not using the QC sheet or the process as it was designed. Now you might say, well, yeah, they're using the QC sheet, but here's my point. If they do it the way you designed it or the way it was designed, whether you designed it or not, doesn't matter. But are they doing it the way it's designed? Are there no blanks? It's either they did it or it's an NA. Okay. You might find that they're not doing that the way it's designed. And then you might want to watch the bulletproof file presentation that I think Melissa's actually going to send out to everybody that's on this as the process as well. Okay. Number 2, 200 amp welders not being used when appropriate. Most people will run over and grab their 110 meg or their 200 volt welder or the 220 volt welder that is not 200 amps. Volts and amps are very, very different. That's not this class, but because some of them are a 200 or 220 machine only capable of producing 180 amps. When the OEM specifies a 200 amp weld on this thing and you don't use the right machine, you've actually not fixed the car correctly. Now, you also might find that you have a 200 amp welder, not a problem, but nobody's using it because it's a much bigger machine than the smaller ones, okay? So just check that. If you got tons of dust and nobody's used it for a long time or the plug's missing, you're probably guilty of that. Number 3, not reviewing the OEM procedures and following that. I kind of beat that up a little bit earlier. Go check and see what it is. And Collision Hub, we did just watch the video called Blueprinting 101. I took a Chevy Malibu. I had a stack of papers that was, I don't know, 1.5 inches thick on the front end on all the seatbelt checks and all that kind of stuff. So if you don't review them when you write the estimate and follow them, that's going to get you in big trouble. Now, I call these the big rocks because not doing any one of these could land your business out of business. Okay, cavity wax not being used enough. Well, normally, like I showed you on that Volkswagen or that Audi, I'm sorry, on that Toyota or the Audi, either way, it doesn't matter. So cavity wax wasn't being used enough. And on top of that, it was rusting out. Well, how do you fix it once it started rusting? So let me give you an example on that white Audi with the rear body panel that they put the seam sealer over the bare metal and also didn't seam seal the edge. It's not just the panel you put on that's rusting, it's the panel it's attached to that was never replaced or repaired in the beginning. So the rear body panel repair became on that one 2 quarter panels, a floor pan, 2 frame rails, and a rear body panel. Totaled the car. So that's how fast it happens, okay? Weld tests not being done and documented. This is a big one, huge one. Say you're going to put a quarter panel on a car, and I'll talk about this here in just a minute on another picture I'm going to put up there. But if you've got a continuous weld and a plug weld, just those 2 things, you need a minimum of 2 welds, 2 test welds. And not only 2 test welds, you want to actually destroy them. And in some cases, some companies will actually put a dial indicator showing how big the pullout was and all that. Take a picture, whatever it looks like, and put it in your file from a bulletproof file standpoint. You might have, like putting a core support on with 3 layers and 2 layers and 4 layers on a squeeze type. There's 3 right there, 3 test welds, and then you got a couple mag welds, mag welds. You might have a couple more there. You might have 5 to 10 test welds per car on a core support. Every car is different. Okay, equipment not maintained or inoperable. And here's another big one. Welder tips on the squeeze type they're not properly dressed, or they don't have any new ones in the shop. What we say is very simple. Buy a new set every time you touch a car. Now, I'm not saying every time you do one weld, but if you, going to put a quarter panel, a rocker, and a B pillar on, buy a set of tips for that car. Put them on the repair order, and then give the tips back to the customer. Say, hey, you bought these, they're yours, and they go, well, I don't want them. Then just throw them in a bucket and you trade it in because it's copper. Okay, so those are the big rocks. Those are the 7 things that, if you don't got that right, get it right. Okay, so this is what's medium risks, but still very important. Okay, check-in sheets not being done, radio codes, etc. listed, and a lot of times people say, oh, the radio codes were done. Yeah, I look at the check-in sheet and there's no radio codes. Well, how do you put the radio codes back in if you didn't record it in the beginning? Those kinds of things. You have the VIN number on your check-in sheet. Here's a big one. You have the VIN number listed on your check-in sheet, except there's a blank there, but you just leave it blank. Well, what that tells me as an investigator is very simple. What else did you miss? You didn't include that. So I say, take it off the form, get it out of there. Back to the bulletproof file, watch that one, okay? Incomplete frame measurements. Most companies, what they'll do is they'll do a frame measurement. It says set up and measure, not a problem. Set up and measure means to set it up in datum. And on top of that, if you're going to set it up in datum, then on top of that, you're going to measure the center section and the front and the back for a total of 8 in 3 different sections. Most shops do 6. Here's the problem. You put down set up and measure, and you're responsible for everything on that car, even though you didn't measure it, because you said set up and measure. Problem is now you measured the 6, and if there's damage in the back or whatever, it just won't protect you later on. Again, copper weld through primer instead of zinc. We talked about that a little bit a few moments ago. Epoxy paint, epoxy primer, not used correctly. where if you're painting base coat, clear coat under a windshield, just walk out in your shop. You're going to see this kind of stuff. And then if they're using anything self-etching primer under windshields, you're not going to comply with at least 2, 3, or possibly even 4 federal motor vehicle safety standards: 212, 216, 208, and 214, I believe it is. So bottom line is that use the wrong primer, you can kill somebody. Okay, painting on urethane set glass, no paint, epoxy only, self-etching primer in the body department, like that, and electronic file not fully documented, back to the bulletproof file. So it's very simple. Here's the 7 things that'll put you out of business, and I invite you to go out today and look at these things. You got my cell phone, call me if you need any help with it. I'm like, it's so funny. I tell people to call me, I'm trying to help, it's free, and they don't call. So anyways, and then this is the other ones, some stuff to really watch out for. There's the 15 things that, if you want your business to look like that, here's your 15 things to look at. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a couple of examples. The picture on the left, the picture on the right, and I'll show you one more picture. And I know we're going to get running here because we're at, I got 4 minutes. We're good, Melissa. Okay, so I look at this picture here on the left with the gentleman that's sitting there. And this is a pretty scary photograph from a lot of different standpoints. So first of all, protection of the vehicle. Got to cover the pigtails. Got AC sticking out here and all that. He's welding without a face shield. Those are eyeglasses. They are not protective glasses. Open skin on in there, right there, and a cord running across the middle of the shop. Somebody can trip on, and everything's kind of wide open to God and everybody on the car. This is not a pretty picture. It looks like a pretty nice shop too. Okay, so this one, next one over on the right. So see that seam sealer? Man, that looks pretty good. They call it stacking dimes. It looks really good. The technician paid a lot of really close attention to it, except a couple things. Number one, they didn't sand the paint before they put it over the top of it on the primer on the E-code from the new part standpoint. First problem. Second primer is there's no primer, or the second problem anyway, there's no primer under the seam sealer. Here's the problem with that. It won't stick. Remember that Audi? That's what actually will happen to this car. And then they didn't even seam seal all the way to the end. Okay. And then also when they sprayed this OEM E-coat color, it's not E-coat, but the OEM E-coat color in there, they didn't even sand it. So we're building failure into this repair, even though you think it looks pretty good. And what about seam sealing this joint right here? That's going to look like that Audi. So it looks pretty good, except it's not. Okay. This one here on the left. Boy, where do I start? I saw this picture and I'm like, oh my God. First of all, sectioned in the wrong spot. I know you can't tell that by the picture, but it was. Weld placement. Well, even without the OEM, they got one there, and then they got one right on the edge. You can't do that. Then they put a weld here that actually didn't even penetrate at all. So this car is going to fall apart. And then they hit it 1, 2, 3, 4 times before they actually got the weld to bite. Oh my God. Then when they lined up the quarter panel, they didn't actually line it up in the box consistent with the other side. They didn't put it back in the same spot. And that tells me structure still bent or something's going on. And then they double hit this weld, probably because it had what's called a half min. They didn't get it completely full. And then this continuous weld over here on the left is kind of scary. Look at the heat effect zone on it. Heat effect zone where it goes out and goes in like this. So they just buried into it. It looks like they double tapped right on the tip there. Just to fill in a hole, and they did the very same thing on the bottom. Oh my God, this car is a complete repair. It's got to be redone. Okay, now on top of that, if I was going to be actually looking at this vehicle, I'd say, wait a minute, shouldn't you cover all of the interior when you're welding? Which they didn't do. And what about this wire that's behind the welds? We're supposed to remove any wiring or any electronics within 12 inches of a weld site. Well, that's pretty much right behind it. So, boy, that picture right there speaks 1,000 words. Oh my gosh, look at this. So they lifted the car up on a clamp, on a lift, and they're doing that. Now, you tell me, is that going to wind up possibly having some body flex to it? It's not on its shoes, and that's not a clamp. That's actually a scissor lift. And then, so this one's pretty scary. Now, let's look at it again. So how many test welds would we need? We need at least one for the plug weld, and at least one for the continuous weld. But the problem with the continuous weld is we got at least two, maybe three different positions. We got the horizontal, we got the horizontal position and the vertical position. So we those two test welds, so at least three there. And then this one here, we've got three. And I don't know if that's a butt joint with an insert, or that's just a butt joint or an open butt joint. I don't know. So we'll see. And then there's three thicknesses of metal there. So we need a squeeze type test there on three thicknesses. And this one's only two. So a minimum of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weld tests that are destructed. So as you can imagine, just that simple picture right there, a little bit scary. You might walk out in your shop and see that. If I were to look at that, you know, that's why I can tell a lot by just looking at a picture, like going, oh my gosh. Now this is actually kind of cool. One of the things due to COVID, we can't really do a whole lot with my company. We used to get together every 6 months, everybody from around the United States, because we're a national company. We're you know, Florida to Alaska to New York to California, it doesn't matter. We got people all over the country. We used to get together. So I send these out to my people. This is one of them I did, and we use SurveyMonkey, and I say, you know, hey, tell me what you see in this picture, and we have multiple choice, and we start to make sure everybody's absolutely calibrated, and then we talk about it. I invite you to do this with your staff, because just because your body technician misses it, your painter should understand this, going, oh, wait a minute, that weld can't be there. Now, back to culture. If the culture says we do quality, then of course you'll do quality, because everybody will catch it somewhere in between. If you have a painter that goes, that's not my problem, I'm just a painter, you got a culture problem. That being said, that was 55 minutes of, oh my gosh, slam it down your throat, a whole bunch of information, probably more than you can digest. I invite you to go back and look at this again. Melissa's going to send out the stuff. And at this point, I'm happy to take any questions. And Melissa, just so you know, I can't see my screen to see if there is any questions. So let me know.
Okay, well, we don't have any right now. As Mark said, I'll follow up and send the handouts along with the links from the previous webinars on post repair and bulletproof file, and then we'll send it with this one as well. And I'll send Mark's information along with that.
Okay. So
and
Melissa,
they can follow up with you. Everybody can follow up with you individually if they have a question.
Sure, absolutely. So let me ask you, Melissa. So I know that you're in the industry and all that. Was that like drinking from a fire hose?
I'm going, I don't want to get in an accident because I don't want ever want my car to have to get fixed.
Yeah.
It's very
counting on everybody that's on this call to actually not to fix the car correctly. And I don't mean to beat up the industry, but I do mean to beat up the industry. Mike Anderson actually did a big article saying, we got to wake up. And Mike and I talk all the time, and you know what? We got to wake up, and it's for this exact reason. Because I can tell you, my wife, before she met me, she wasn't really involved in collision repair. Right now, she said, if our car ever gets hit, we're totaling it. We are not driving that car ever again. And I said, relax, honey, we're going to be okay. So.
Well, this will certainly help. Keep the garages on their toes, and it's really great information. And hopefully, they'll follow up with you with any questions. That'll finish up the webinar, and don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel for past webinars. And if you like it, give us a thumbs up, and we appreciate any of your comments, and always are looking for other topics that you guys would like to have for presentations. With that, thanks, Mark. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.